Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Welcome, friends, to the next chapter with Charlie. Let me tell you, we are in for a very special show today with a guest whom I am calling a rock star. You know, I couldn't describe Rhonda's story any better than the opening words found on her website where Rhonda writes this: "For 20 years, my life was a wreck. I was an alcoholic who attempted suicide 3 different times. And oh, let's not forget all those lovely DUIs and the week I spent in jail." Yet today, Rhonda is an Emmy-winning life coach who has been on Oprah and written several best-selling books. And in addition to her trauma years, Rhonda has hosted more than 600 episodes of reality TV and much more. So I think she's qualified to make the podcast. Then that's enough for me. Let's get Rhonda to the show. Rhonda Britten. It's such a treat having you with me.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Chap. Yeah, and I love the next chapter, and the next chapter, and wait, the next chapter, and wait, the next chapter.
It always is. And you know, the beauty of the next chapter is it's not limited. What I can do, I can talk about anything.
That's right.
Because anything is the next chapter. So right. I basically, podcast people ask me, well, tell me about your audience. And I say, I don't know. And I kind of don't care. I just talk about what I'm interested in. And other people seem to be interested in it.
That's right. That's right.
So, I want you to, what's interesting, I am a fellow alcoholic and drug user. And believe me, I can relate to multiple DUIs and all the trauma that comes with that lifestyle. But mostly, my guess is, like you, these events turned out to be some of the greatest learnings about the depths of my interior life. I'm sure you agree, or maybe not. We'll find out.
Well, I do agree, because I think that the worst days of our lives are where the seeds of our destiny lie. So, when we think of our worst days and we want to put them behind us and never think of them again, and we're ashamed of them, or they're we don't, want to make sure they're hidden away, we're missing the whole point of those days. But of course, there does have to be healing and sometimes reconciliation and forgiveness and all these lovely things before we can look at it clear-eyed. But with hindsight, I bet all of us can look at the worst days of our lives and find a thread to where we are now. And so I like to think of the worst days as my destiny moments. And when you're asking me about how I got here and what made me who I am today, it is one of the worst days of my life. And I was 14 years old, and I grew up in a little tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year. 2 restaurants, the Douglas House Fancy Buffet Hotel and Big Boy. And my parents were separated, and my father was coming over to take us out.
Wait a minute. You worked at Bob's Big Boy?
No, I did not. I worked at Kaliva Cafe.
Oh, okay.
We only had 2 restaurants, but only one was Big Boy and the Douglas House. And I got to tell you, there was no McDonald's. The closest McDonald's was an hour and a half away. And you could I never went to McDonald's until I was in college. Let's just put it that way. There was no fast food. There was nothing. There was this little tiny ice cream, like the Dairy Queen kind, but it wasn't Dairy Queen. It was just you could get vanilla and chocolate. That's it. That's all you could get. That's the extent of the party down. That's the fast food. That's it. That's all we had. And so my parents were separated, and my father was coming to take us out to the fancy Douglas House Buffet Hotel. So that was a big deal. And I couldn't wait to flirt with the boys my age, because they were all, bus backs, right? So my mother made me a brand new dress. It was white cotton. She made me a beautiful scarf to go along with it. It was white cotton with black polka dots. And I wrapped it around my neck like I was Barbra Streisand, or for the younger girls, Beyonce or Taylor Swift. And I go into my mom's room, and she's fluffing up her beehive hairdo, and she's putting on a rose-colored lipstick and her blue eyeshadow. And my sisters are in the bathroom fighting it out in our one bathroom. My dad walks in the back door and goes, "Come on, girls, let's go, let's go, let's go," because that's what dads do. And me and my mom start walking out towards the door. My sister's still in the bathroom fighting it out. And as me and my mom and dad walk out, my dad says he's got to get his coat from the car. Now, this coat was a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. And Charlie, I know you're old enough to remember leisure suit coats because those were hot in the day. And so I couldn't wait for my dad to put on that good-looking coat because he was going to be a good-looking guy. And so as he went to his trunk and opened it up, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that he did not grab his leisure suit coat, but he grabbed a gun.
No
and
way.
He started yelling at my mother, "You made me do this. You made me do this." And he fires. And I start screaming, "What are you doing, Dad? Stop. What are you doing, Dad?" And he cocks the gun again and he points it at me. And I absolutely believe I'm next. And with the gun in his hand, pointing at me, he blinks, I blink, he blinks. We're frozen in time. And my mother, seeing this, literally with her last breath, screams out, "No, don't." And my father, realizing my mother is still alive, takes that bullet intended for me and shoots my father a second time. And that second bullet goes through my mother's abdomen, out her back, and lands in the car horn. And for the next 20 minutes, all we heard is, and then my father cocked the gun a third time, put the gun to his head, and fired. So in a matter of 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, I was the only witness to my father murdering my mother and committing suicide in front of me.
And how old were you?
I was 14. So now I'm here, I'm 14, I'm the sole witness, and this is, I don't know how you would have handled it, Charlie, but this is what I did. I absolutely believed it was my fault because I was the only one there who could have physically stopped it. And I did not grab the gun, and I did not kick my father's shins, and I did not jump in front of my mother, right? I did nothing heroic, and now they're both dead. And so in that moment, I like to say I split into two, the outside Rhonda and the inside Rhonda. The outside Rhonda, I was fine. Straight A student, still a straight A student. No, I'm fine. But the inside Rhonda took it all on, right? The guilt, the shame, the humiliation, the embarrassment, you don't get to be happy. You don't get to be happy if you watch your mother die. And you did nothing about it. You just don't get to be happy. So for the next 20 years, as you shared,
let me ask, how did your fellows in high school respond to that? What was their response to you while you're in school? Did anybody talk about it or just ignore it?
No, they ignored it. And then my relatives, nobody came over, nobody fed us, nobody brought us food. And some people weren't allowed to hang out with us anymore because we're from one of those families. Right. So, my relatives scattered. I mean, a perfect example is my uncle. A few years back, I was talking to my uncle and he said, "I never asked you this, but where did you girls go after that?" And I go, "Uncle, we lived in that same house." He goes, "Well, I called once." I'm like, "Yeah, he lives 20 minutes. He lives 20 minutes away. Okay. He lives 20 minutes away." And so he didn't stop by and nobody did. Nobody brought food over. Nobody brought casseroles over. Nobody checked on us. Nobody helped pay our bills. We got some Social Security. Me and my younger sister got Social Security. I think it was like $200 a month. And that paid for helping pay the mortgage because we lived in a house. So we had to pay the mortgage. And so we all worked. I worked as a waitress at Caliva Cafe. My older sister worked at a grocery store. My little sister babysat. And so you
had no adults guarding over you?
My older sister had just turned 18. Turned 18. So she was a senior in high school. She just graduated from high school, like literally the week before, I think it was. So she was 18, so we were able to stay together.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't actually think anybody came by, but, when I talk to my sister now, she says that she had to fill out forms. But, I never saw anybody. Nobody came over. Nobody checked on us. So, during those, and we still stayed in that house because they died in the driveway. So every day for 2 years, I had to walk by where they died. And so I just acted like nothing was wrong either until I hit college. And then that's when I discovered alcohol. And, alcohol was very handy when you're in pain because it just obliterates all your thoughts. And of course, I never told anybody how my parents died because it was completely humiliating and completely embarrassing. And I didn't want to be, ostracized there because I went to a college in a different state. So I thought, I can be different. Nobody will know my story. Nobody will know. And I was so excited. And then, of course, I found alcohol to numb my pain, which did not make me necessarily a good date.
And, and that's what people don't understand about alcohol and drugs. People think that many substance abusers are doing it to get high.
Yeah.
It doesn't begin that way. You're doing it to get normal.
That's
You're
right.
doing it to silence the demons.
That's right. And also, I was numb and I didn't feel unless I was drinking. So when I drank, I could cry. I was not necessarily, as I drank more and more, when I was in the beginning of my drinking, I was still an okay drunk per se.
Sure.
But as my drinking escalated, I was not a good drunk, right? Like I was not a happy drunk. My sisters are happy drunks. I was not a mean, but like a crying, why me, angry drunk, right? So that's how I escalated my drinking. And then when I escalated my drinking, as you shared, I got 3 DUIs. And then I had those 3 lovely suicide attempts. And it was really the 3rd suicide attempt that I realized something, Charlie, that I'm not very good at killing myself, not good at it. And not good. And
fail at that too.
Failed at that too. So then I realized I had to start over because during those 20 years, while I was drinking, drugging, doing DUIing and suiciding, I was also going to therapy and I was going to workshops and I was reading books. So, trying to manage everyday life. Yes, I was using alcohol, but I was also in the same moment doing everything I could do in order to make myself be better. And I read my first self-help book when I was 12 and I was going to be a minister when I was 13. So I've been a self-help junkie, a reader, a learner my whole life. And so I did that. And then, so when I had that 3rd suicide attempt, and by the way, when you do try to kill yourself 3 times, they do put you in a psychiatric ward for evaluation. So they put me in a psychiatric ward for evaluation. They deemed me not crazy and let me go home. And I lived in a little studio apartment all by myself, which not a good idea either when you're suicidal. And I remember thinking to myself, I've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of tools. I've learned a lot in all these classes and books and therapy that I've done. But it has never taken away the feeling that there's something wrong with me. That there has to be something wrong with me. And
wrong with you, not with
wrong with me. Wrong with me.
You internally, not wrong with the events of your life, but wrong with you as a person.
Yeah, and I think I'm not alone, right? That's what shame is. Shame is there's something wrong with me, right? Blame is you did something wrong, but shame is all about I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. And so I remember thinking to myself when I came home from that psychiatric ward visit and feeling so defeated because one, I wanted to die, Charlie, and here I am alive. And I remember thinking to myself, I remember this so vividly, if I'm not dying, there has to be a reason why I'm alive. And everything that I've been doing has not gotten me where I need to go, has not moved me to the other side. And I remember saying to myself, I have to start over. Like I have to start all over. And so the thought of what do kindergartners do came to mind. And I said, well, they get a calendar and gold stars. So I went out, got a calendar, and got some gold stars. And for the next 30 days, and by the way, I still have this calendar in my office. For 30 days, I gave myself a gold star anytime I did anything good. And we're talking about drinking and not getting drunk or getting angry and not breaking anything, right? Like we're talking, that's the level of awareness I was at. So, but at the end of 30 days, I had a calendar filled with gold stars. And that was the beginning of me recognizing that I did have hope, that I really could change, that circumstances and I could be different. I didn't yet know how fear was playing such an instrumental part of my life, but I would soon discover that.
How did you come to the decision that it was your responsibility to take care of yourself rather than so many people will depend upon AA and therapists? I think I'm a believer in AA. I'm a believer in therapists. I've been going to therapy for 35 years. I discovered that therapy, self-help books, Alcoholics Anonymous are all resources. They are not me. There is something about me that has to embrace my own personal brokenness and say, there is something I need to do. Like, the brilliant book, I don't know if you read Atomic Habits, but it leans to that it's up to you to do something, just tiny things you do all the time. How did you come to that conclusion?
Like I said, I've been doing so much work on myself, and, I started realizing that the world wasn't going to change out there. And I think that I had felt so defeated after that third suicide attempt and the facing that I was alive still, that I realized that, there has to be a different way. There has to be something else. And I didn't want to keep living the way I had been, right? I didn't want to keep making myself the enemy. I didn't want to keep, hurting myself. I didn't want to keep, thinking I'm a horrible person, right? So I had done enough work on myself where I knew there was the other side, but I didn't know how to get to the other side. I didn't know how to get there. Right. And all those tools and learnings were wonderful. And, they absolutely got me to the place probably of this recognition. But then eventually I had to go, you know what? You know what it was, Charlie? I had to become humble enough and willing enough and vulnerable enough to say, I don't know how to do it. And I need some help. And I must do something for myself in order to change this. So getting that calendar with gold stars was really the turning point in my life. And that led me to eventually, a few years later, becoming sober. And so that was the next turning point, right? And then I went through a forgiveness of my parents. And I'd already thought that I forgave them. I was going to be a minister when I was 13, so I thought I forgave them the first day. But doing the deep work, the real deep work of forgiveness, right? So I thought I forgave them. So then once I got sober, then I went through the healing work and the forgiveness work with my parents and myself, because my father was actually the easiest to forgive. My mother was the second person, harder to forgive. And then I was the hardest to forgive. But to get to that humility is the salve that helps us on taking that bridge from where we are to where we want to go. It's humility.
You write, what I'm interested in, and you write that you discovered that because you're talking about enemies, who's the enemy? And you said, you wrote that although therapy and self-help books and programs were helpful, that the way you discovered that your greatest enemy was fear.
Yes.
You're going to have to translate that for me because I'm not quite sure. I have to admit, I don't quite get that. I believe it, but what is the fear that's going on?
Well, this is what, I recognize that I did. And then I see it in my clients. I see it in human reality. I see it in human beings all the time, is that we think we have all these problems. We're procrastinators. We're people pleasers. We shame ourselves. We blame others. We negative self-talk. We compete. We judge. We deflect. We feel bitter. We feel entitled, right? We manipulate. We try to control things. And all of these, what I call fear responses, we think are the problems, right? So I thought that my problems were the outcome of my fear. When I realized and when I started understanding that I didn't people please unless I had a fear. I didn't get overwhelmed unless I had a fear. I didn't get defensive unless I had a fear. I didn't shut people out unless I had a fear. I didn't compare myself. Unless I had a fear. So all the problems I think I had, which were overwhelming, and I think that's true for many people, they think they have so many problems. They're trying to pick off the problems one at a time. Well, I'll work on people pleasing, then I'll work on procrastination, then I'll work on overwhelm, then I'll work on my anxiety, right? And while that's a strategy, what's really happening is those are simply fear responses. And underneath there is what I call a core fear that actualizes manifests those responses. So when I started, I remember so vividly realizing this because it was kind of like, it was a light bulb moment. It was like what? Right. How can this be? And once I started really understanding that procrastination wasn't my problem. People pleasing wasn't my problem. Feeling guilty.
Symptoms. They were consequences.
They were symptoms. And this is the thing, Charlie. People talk about fear all the time. There's no speaker alive or no teacher alive that doesn't talk about fear. But nobody, and this is my experience the entire time I was attempting to heal myself. Everybody told you what to do, but they never told you how to do it. They would tell you, forgive yourself, never told you how. They would tell you, love yourself more, but they never told you how. They would say, it's fear, but they never told you how. So I went on a quest because I felt so stupid and so like, what is my problem? Why aren't I getting this? That I decided that I was going to learn how all these things. Like, how do you do it? How do you really learn to love yourself if you don't love yourself? How do you really learn to have confidence if you don't have confidence? How do you really learn to forgive yourself if you haven't forgiven yourself? Because it's not just a statement. It's an actual process that you put yourself through. And so that's what I did with fear. Everybody talks about fear. Oh, it's fear. It's fear. And even some people say, oh, it's hidden. It's like, okay, all right. Well, okay, good information. But what do you do? Well, nobody told me how. Nobody said how. So I set upon myself to figure out how, which is why I created the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom.
Yeah. And this is in your book, The Fearless Living.
That's right. My book, Fearless Living.
Thank you. Thank you.
My book, Fearless Living.
I want to promote that book.
Yeah. And so when I started figuring out this whole fear thing, that's when it's almost like the world changed on its axis, the way that I saw everything changed. And neuroscience tells us that the only way we can truly change our life for good is by changing our perception. And so being told to forgive yourself, being told to love yourself, being told to have worth is not shifting your perception. In essence, it might motivate you, it might inspire you, or it might make you feel bad about yourself. So it's really about understanding how to do these things so you can make the changes you want. Because you're not wrong, you're not bad, you're not stupid, you're not a procrastinator, you're not lazy. When you read Atomic Habits, you're not doing those things because you're stupid, lazy, wrong, right, procrastinator, etc. You're not doing them because fear is in charge of your life instead of you. And once you can crack the code of fear, then you have access and the willingness and the ability to do the things you want to do.
I have a poet that I read daily, and he reads his poems, and he's brilliant. He's got one of those poets' voices, kind of a David White-ish kind of guy. You want to listen to what he says. His name is Steve Garnis Holmes, and he writes in one of his poems, my power lies not in my fear, but in my trust.
Yes.
And how does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some people would use the word trust. Some people would use the word acceptance. Some people would use the word love. It's what resonates with you. So, it's kind of like we all have what I call an essential nature. And based on that poem, his essential nature is probably trusting, because he knows that when he's trusting himself, trusting the universe, trusting source, trusting in what the lay of the land is, what the plan is, then he can relax and he can be himself, right? I have to be authentic, and I have to have self-acceptance. When I have self-acceptance, then I'm free. Really, I'm free to be who I'm meant to be. Unless I have self-acceptance, I'm trying to manipulate myself for the world. So all of us have what I call the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom. We all have those things that resonate with us and heal us. And, again, that's why I created the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, so you can discover yours, so that you can access it, so that you can start living from that place rather than from, as your favorite poet says, fear rather than trust.
Yeah, I so love what you're saying, but I'm very curious. I love your identification that we are told what we need to do, what about it, but we're not told the how to. Is that what you get into with the wheel of fear and the
Wheel of Freedom?
Wheel of Freedom. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a big how person. So I am a practical mystic, so to speak, right? I'm deeply spiritual, yet I'm very practical. So, while I have a little woo-woo in me, I'm also going to give it to you straight, because I believe all of us need to, again, understand those hows. So the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom, let me start with the Wheel of Fear. Each one of them has 4 components. And the Wheel of Fear has what I call a trigger. And that trigger is what I call your core fear. It is that fear that is underneath all your other fears. And by the way, that Wheel of Fear does not want to be found. That core fear does not want to be found, because that fear wants to keep you safe. And if it's found, it can't keep you safe, right? It's like the Secret Service hiding out. If everybody knows about it, can't keep you safe, right? Like, no, or the alarm can't keep you safe, right? So what the Wheel of Fear does is hide from you, because it needs to protect you. It needs to keep you alive. It needs to keep you safe, because fear only wants you to live. That's all it cares about.
It's a protection mechanism.
It literally is just a protection mechanism. But again, how often have you said that to yourself? I know for myself, okay, it's a protection mechanism. Okay, great. But what do I do then? Right? What do I do? So that's why when I started tracking fear and started working with clients and starting to understand their fear and how it evolved, is why I created the Wheel of Fear. So you can actually see how fear works in your life. And then, of course, more importantly, how to get on the Wheel of Freedom, because your Wheel of Freedom is the unlock. It unlocks the Wheel of Fear. It literally puts it in its place and unlocks your true essential nature. So the Wheel of Fear has 4 components. The first one is the trigger. And the trigger is the thing you do not want anyone to think about you. You do not want anyone to have it near you, not around you one bit, right? No way. You don't want to be called that. No way.
And even if you're not, you perceive it as such. We get triggers that are really not triggers intended, but we interpret them, we perceive them. I like your idea of perception. We perceive them as attacks against us, or against my being, my essence.
Well, we have to do that unless we wake up, because it's the only way we stay safe. Right? So we think fear is thine enemy. As we all know, if you just read self-help books, you know that fear is not the enemy. But most people don't know how to work with fear either. They don't understand fear. They just call it fear, that false evidence appearing real, or, face everything and rise. And again, those are handy acronyms. I love those acronyms. But in the moment, for many people, those do not help them. They do not get them through that moment, right? They don't know how to do it. Because again, the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom are very personal. So your Wheel of Fear is going to be different than mine. Now, many people ask me, well, Rhonda, aren't we all afraid of not being good enough? Yes, we are. All of us are afraid of not being good enough. But that is the generic version of the Wheel of Fear, right? So yes, I could say I'm afraid of not being good enough. I could say you're not afraid of not being good enough, but it's not going to have the impact and the weight of something that's personalized to you.
Personal experience.
Personalized wheel, so that it resonates with you. So for instance, I'll just use mine, for example. And, it has 4 components. I'm just going to give a quick picture for those watching. There's the trigger. And you ever heard of righty tighty, lefty loosey when we're doing doing that screw and screwdriver, right?
No, I have not.
Oh my God, it's a Midwest thing. So righty tighty means you're going to tighten the screw. And lefty loosey means you're going to loosen the screw.
You know how helpful that is? I'm going to remember that.
Seriously, I use it every time I use a screwdriver. I literally say to myself, righty tighty, lefty loosey. So it's a Midwest thing. And so you can see that the Wheel of Fear goes righty tighty, right?
Okay.
It goes from your trigger. The trigger is the thing that activates your Wheel of Fear. Goes into fear responses. So the fear responses, I'm going to read a few right now, give you a little quiz and see.
Oh, fun.
Yes, quiz time. So if you're able and safe.
Am I graded?
No, kind of are.
Okay.
Well, you're given a score, not graded. But those of us listening or watching, if you're safe to shut your eyes, please do it. If you're not, please don't. And nod your head. And the reason I want you to nod your head when you do any of these things or feel any of these things is I want you to own it. I want you to be like, yes, I do that. Okay, Rhonda Britten, yes, I do that. So just own it, right? So here's the list. Do you ever deny yourself? Do you ever isolate? Do you ever pretend everything's okay when it's not? Do you ever hide out? Do you ever settle? Do you ever compare? How about manipulate? What about get defensive? Judge? What about complain? Procrastinate? Worry? Struggle? What about blame? What about waiting and calling it patience? What about control? Deflect? Do you ever feel bitter, powerless, self-centered, dissatisfied, resentful, entitled? Do you ever feel guilty, disappointed? Are you ever a perfectionist or a people pleaser? What about indifferent, irritated, like you might be now reading these words to you? What about overwhelmed, ignored, self-pity, annoyed? What about victimized? Okay, well, so there is your quiz.
Sounds like you just took a photograph of my soul. Like you just articulated many of those. I do, absolutely.
Yeah, so when I'm talking to an audience, whether it's 1,000 people or 100 people, over 95% of the audience has over 95% of those. And right. I would dare say most have 100%. So these are what people think their problems are. These are the things people believe there are character flaws. These are the things they try to solve. And these are the things that keep them changing the chairs on the Titanic than actually facing the fear itself, dealing with the fear itself, loving the fear itself. So those are called what I call fear responses. So the first thing that you can do in actuality to change your life before you get your wheel of fear is just start relabeling things. So instead of saying, that's my problem, I wish I quit doing that, oh, it's wrong with me, instead say, that's a fear response. Just relabel the things you think are problems, that you think are bad, that you think you shouldn't be doing, that you think you should know better, that you think you should be more evolved than. Anytime you do any of those things, then just label it instead of beating yourself up, instead of judging yourself, say to yourself, there's a fear response. That means fear is on patrol. Yes, fear is on patrol. So that is a very great first step for everybody listening without knowing their wheel. You know what I would add to that works for me. This is something that works for me is labeling, but the labeling process for me is a reframing. Yes, that's
it's a reframing of the way that I'm interpreting these things.
Right. So relabeling, yes, we're saying the same thing. Relabeling is a reframing, right? So it's the exact same thing. So when you decide to relabel something, you are reframing it. So then you can say to yourself, I'm not stupid because I was lazy or because I judged, or I'm not a horrible person because I judged. Fear's on patrol. Okay, I'm going to relabel / reframe that and know that that is fear. It's not that I'm stupid or weak or lazy or a loser or incompetent, right? Or selfish or et cetera, et cetera. It's just how I dance with fear. And so when we can see that, that's the beginning of shifting that perception, right? So you get triggered, right? And by the way, in the beginning, you don't even know how you're triggered because it's just happened so often. You don't even know it's happening. So most people recognize they're on their wheel of fear based on their fear responses. And so if we keep going around the wheel, let me get it out again. And we keep going around the wheel. I'm going to get it out. Here it is. We go from our trigger to our fear responses. And then number 3 is our core negative feeling. And that core negative feeling is the feeling you do not want to feel. And we've all had that feeling we don't want to feel. You felt it before, I felt it before, and we do not want to feel this. And the desire to not feel it again is one of the main engines to keep the wheel of fear spinning. And then let's say we do feel it again. Okay, because if we keep doing our fear responses, we will feel it again.
Right.
And then you get that core negative feeling and it drops you down into self-destructive, right? And that's when we start having that feeling, that's when we want to give up. That's when we think we're too flawed. That's when we really go to town with, there's nothing I can do. I'm stuck being like this, right? And that's when we, eat a gallon of ice cream. And then when we drink that 5th of vodka, or when we sleep too much or too little, or when we exercise too much, or when we, isolate and don't get out of bed for 3 days, right? So those are our fear responses. And then, self-destructive behaviors. And when we do self-destructive behaviors, it kind of implants and confirms that we have to work harder to avoid fear. We have to work harder. You see? So it just proves the wheel of fear is true. It just proves that you are your trigger. So I'll give you mine so you can see it in action if you like. My trigger, my core fear is the fear of being seen as a loser. Now, I want you to pay attention because I've never been called a loser in my life. I'm a straight A student, class president, sang on the Souls in Choir, got a full ride to college, So I was the first woman in the finance department at the University of Minnesota, the largest institution at that time in the country. So, I'm not a loser. I'm a winner. Look at all these great things I do. Well, my fear of being a loser, my fear of being seen as a loser. And again, I don't know this logically. I don't see it. I don't know it. In fact, when I discovered the Wheel of Fear and started unraveling what mine was, when I discovered and really hit on loser, I was devastated. Because if anybody would think I'm a loser, I would be devastated, right? Well, now...
Was it one of those imposter that you feel if people only knew me, they would really know that I'm a loser? Or was it different than that?
It's actually beyond that because I had plenty of evidence when I work with people to get their wheels. What they do is their Wheel of Fear gives them quote unquote resistance, right? And it says, well, nobody would call me that. Like I would say, nobody called me a loser. Nobody has, right? So I would say, that's not my Wheel of Fear. Nobody called me a loser. Yes, but what if they did? Well, they would never. Well, I understand that, but what if they did? And oh, by the way, what if it's Jesus? Right? What if it was Jesus who came down? Or what if it was your mom, right? Or what if it was somebody you really admire and respect? What if it was somebody who you really care about their opinion and they thought and said to you, you're a loser, and they meant it? Well, that would be, right? Because we rationalize, well, that nobody would say that.
Wouldn't you fight them? Wouldn't you say how wrong they are, or would you just identify with it really quickly?
Well, you may or may not. That's you may or may not. So it's one of the reasons that question you just asked is why I have several exercises in my book and in my Fearless Living Transformation program to put you through the paces to help you uncover that thing that doesn't want to be found. Because this doesn't want to be found. Right? It doesn't want to be found. It wants to keep you away from it because if it's found, then it can't keep you safe as much as it can. So it doesn't want to be found. So I take you through a series of exercises so it reveals itself. And that's what identifying your Wheel of Fear does, is it reveals that thing that's been running silently your life without your awareness. And you've been labeling it a whole bunch of other things. But in reality, it's fear just trying to keep you safe. But the thing is, that our neurobiology doesn't know the difference between a physical fear and an emotional fear. Right. It doesn't know the difference. So, you walk into a room and you are worried about being rejected. Your body and brain thinks it's exactly the same as being on the top of an 80-story building and, you got your toes over the ledge, right? Right. So it doesn't know the difference. So because it doesn't know the difference, it has you respond so quickly to even the scent of that, to even the thought that somebody would think you're a loser, right? Going to a party, going to a networking event, and somebody gives me a look like, whatever, Rhonda, I don't know who that is, right? Just gives me a look, right? That may very well create a Wheel of Fear moment and trigger, right? But what will I do in that moment? Well, some of us will say this room isn't for me. Some of us will blame the guy for being a jerk. Some of us will walk out. Some of us will try to get him to like us, right? We'll all do all these responses in order to push that out of our mind, to get that away from us. When in fact, if we could simply say, my Wheel of Fear is up. Okay. The way he looked at me you really ignited my loser in me, that part of me that fears I'm a loser. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm going to go over to my Wheel of Freedom now. I'm not going to dance this dance with Wheel of Fear. I'm going to just go right over to my Wheel of Freedom and practice that. I don't even have to indulge. I don't even have to psychoanalyze myself on my Wheel of Fear. I just have to move to my Wheel of Freedom.
I want to talk about Wheel of Freedom, but let me, if you will, tell you a personal story.
Ooh, all righty.
Ooh, all righty.
Yes, please do.
I was raised until I was 7 years old in a dysfunctional home where my father and mother were divorced. My mother worked the graveyard shift and couldn't take care of me. So she would give me to relatives. She had 9 sisters, or 8 sisters. I think there was 9 of them. And would give me to certain relatives to live for a while, to just stay. And it would be, months at a time, couple of months at a time. And they would say to me, in the beginning, oh, do you want to come and live with us for the rest of your life? And I'm saying, are you kidding? Like a family? Yes, of course. And inevitably, it would only last for a month or two and I'd get shipped off to another relative, but nobody ever told me why. Yes. So this happened 3 or 4 times, and then I lived with my father for a year who drank a quart of liquor a day, loved me to death. He probably loved me as much as anybody on the planet, but he was incapable of showing that love because he was drunk all the time. Yeah. And so in a way, I look at that as almost fortunate, Rhonda. I look at that as almost fortunate, and that it helped me identify what my core fears are. And my core fears are rejection and abandonment. And there was the longest time I became I knew how to deal with abandonment. I knew how to manage and cope with abandonment and rejection. And for my entire life, when I was adopted by a goddess. And she gave me the opposite of love and just love and confidence. But that fear of abandonment and rejection never went away. It was always part of me. And it was not, I'm 75 years old, and it was not until perhaps 6 months ago on a podcast, I was interviewing this author, Andrew Matthews, who talked to me and helped me understand that I was able to accept that now this is going to sound really strange, that those were not just events that occurred to me, they became my identity.
That's right. Yes.
And my identity today remains rejected and abandonment, but I've reframed that, renamed that, and I've used that as my core reason for I am a servant to anybody that is rejected and abandoned. I identify with them in a minute. I work with the poor and the disenfranchised. But that shift, Rhonda, that shift was amazing. This was not what happened to me. So I'm dealing it as an outside deal. It is the core me, and that the core me is that fear of that. And there was such a release. 75 years later, there's such a release of understanding that drives who I am, and it drives me in positive ways, not in negative ways. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it totally makes sense. And, you're bringing up a really good point because, yes, identity is, obviously it lives inside our wheel of fear. And we all have things that we identify with, just like you're saying. And we all have stories like yours are, in the way that they're personal to us, right? They're just personal to us. Your stories are personal to you, which you've overcome so much. And I'm so grateful that you had this amazing person adopt you, that you got to be able to be loved up. And the way the wheel of fear is created, it has very little to do, or it has some to do with your history, like you're saying, abandonment and rejected. It may have something to do with that. Probably does. But it's also other things, because neuroscience has now shared with us that some of our fears are handed down through our DNA. So many people look for why they're the way they are, right? Why am I like this? 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 And again, that's lovely. And it's an interesting journey. And I did the same thing. And most of us do. And we want to have that why solved. But really, the wheel of fear may not have a clear why. It's a series of events. Like your whole life was a series, when you were younger, a series of events. So it's a series of events, and it's not just one thing. Because people will say to me, well, you have your wheel of fear because your father killed your mother. That happened when I was 14. Your wheel of fear is created by the time you were 7, as you said. And it is based on who you hang out with, right? How you're raised. It's regarding your environment. It's how you're treated. But it's also through your DNA. So I love that you've embraced, rejected, and abandoned. I love that. And it may or may not be your wheel of fear, but it's probably pretty darn close.
Okay.
And your wheel of freedom then is what you would access in order to activate and to heal that rejection and abandonment. Now, you've used the tool called identity, which again, great tool, lovely tool. I say, yay, yay. And what we want to do is we actually want to transcend it, which means we want to go beyond the identity and we want to find that thing on the wheel of freedom called your essential nature, that part of you that you gave up during those years. There was something that you hid away, something that was really sacred to you that you, again, unconsciously hid away because it wasn't safe to express, right? So mine was authenticity. I couldn't be authentic because I was always too much, too this, too that. I was too something. So I was taught that being authentic, and my wheel of freedom was created, my wheel of fear, my essential nature, what I hid away was that authenticity because it wasn't safe to be authentic. It wasn't safe to be authentic at all. And so in order for me to transcend my wheel of fear, which my trigger is loser, is authenticity. Now think for a minute, if my essential nature is authenticity and have that core fear of being a loser, myself says, my wheel of fear tells me, well, if you're going to be authentic, everyone's going to know you're a loser. Everyone's going to know it. So your wheel of fear and wheel of freedom dance with each other. In order to be authentic, I must transcend my wheel of fear, right? And so my desire to embrace my authenticity, the very thing that I didn't think I could do, the very thing that I worshiped, my whole life, I would write C.C. Cummings' poem, that great quote, which I'm going to butcher, is like, to become who you are is the hardest thing you could ever do in your life, but keep going, right? I would write that over and over when I was 12. I wanted to be myself so bad, but it was not okay to be myself. It was dangerous to be myself. And it's one of the reasons why I drank. I couldn't be myself. Right. So whenever I'm, quote unquote, stuck in any way, shape, or form in my business and in my life now, I look and go, okay, where am I being authentic? Where am I not being authentic? And I will find a place where I am still silently and secretly and really clever, because fear knows everything you know. It's as smart as you are, knowledgeable as you are, spiritual as you are, educated as you are. It knows everything you know. And it will use all of it against you to keep you stuck, to keep you small, to keep you the same, because again, that's how it keeps you alive. So while you and I are getting more educated and smarter, it gets smarter. So when I have my wheel of fear come up, my wheel of fear isn't like it used to be, so blatant and so obvious to me now, right? No, it's really tricky. And I'll talk to my best friend, who's a certified fearless living life coach with me. And she'll go, oh, your fear's tricky. And I'll be like, yeah, because I don't even see it, right? It's like I again, identify it through my fear responses. And I go, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this. What's going on? And then I will do what I call tracing back to see how my loser came up and where I was denying my authenticity. So instead of focusing on worrying about, i.e., not being like a loser, I'm focused on how to be most authentically me. And by the way, to be authentic, when I first discovered the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, when I first started doing this work, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what authentic meant, right? Because I had hid it away so much and walked away around the world responding, right? Reacting, right? Instead of being authentic, instead of being soul directed, I was just responding to the world, reacting to the world. I wasn't soul responding. I wasn't being directive. I wasn't directing my life. So in order for me to even start understanding what authenticity is, because again, that's a word, you have a worthy problem. Oh, you're not being authentic, right? All these words are just tramped around like we should all know what they mean. I didn't even know what being authentic looked like.
Of course.
So I started asking myself literally every day, this went on for months, literally every day, all day long, I would ask myself, I'd pick up, whatever I was doing, this mason jar, I drink out of mason jars during the day. It's like, well, do I like this mason jar? Would I choose a mason jar? Me, Rhonda Britten? Seriously, I would do I like these glasses or do I like these glasses? What? Like literally, I would walk around. My favorite color was green because my boyfriend in kindergarten's favorite color was green. My favorite food was my ex-husband's Mexican. Again, I like Mexican, but is it my favorite food? No, but I took it on as my own and I believed it.
Right.
I believed it was my favorite food.
Right.
Until I started putting everything out and going, well, is it?
Brilliant.
But most of us do not want to question ourselves like that because we're afraid of what we're going to discover. We're afraid we're going to find our disappointments. We're afraid we're going to find our shame. We're afraid we're going to discover that we're
exactly what we need to do.
Exactly what we need to do.
Let me add a story here. I want to add one. I want to complete my story because you reminded me, that's beautiful, of my story, that my identity is abandonment and rejection, but that is part of my identity. I am also, for the last 7 years, I have dwelt deeply into contemplative mysticism and of source, and that is all about the love of God, and that this love is what guides me, is what rules me. That is my identity, my truest identity. When I can get to the core of my identity is I am loved. No matter what I do, no matter what shit I do today or tomorrow, I am loved. I am not judged. There is not a judgmental. There's not retribution. There is only acceptance and forgiveness and love. And that is, I think that's my authentic part. My authentic part is that I am a loved human being. Now, this isn't, I don't just walk around on a planet of wowie wooey, oh, I'm loved. I mean, it is a battle of always going through that. But I do know in my core of cores. That's why I really identify. I love this idea of authenticity. And when we were talking about Steve Garnett's poem about trust instead of fear, that you trust in authenticity and I trust in love. It's not, and one is, they're not rated, they're not ranked, they're just maybe the same thing, but just different ways of phrasing it.
Well, authentic gets me to love, right? So if I'm being authentic, that's a self-loving act.
Absolutely.
And that allows me to live my purpose here on earth, right? Because anytime I'm pretending or trying to live out a destiny that is not authentic to me, then I am not being a vehicle of God. I'm not being a vehicle of love. I'm not being what I'm meant to be. I might look good. I might do the right things according to society, and I might look generous, and I might look kind, and I might look, but it's not really what I'm meant to do and who I'm meant to be. So for me, the self-loving act is to practice authenticity, because when I practice authenticity, that is loving myself. Because for most of my life, and my wheel of fear tells me, well, Rhonda, you're really a loser. So, hey, lady, sorry about that. Well, how can you love a loser? Well, okay, wait, but I do love my loser in me, right? And again, I'm not my loser, and you're not rejected and abandoned. But those are the things we identify with, because those are the words we can use in order to make our life make sense, right?
Let me ask a question here, because you said something really important. How do we get to the point where we can understand our core of what it means to be authentic? Your question, how do we get, is this the wheel of freedom? How do we get to authenticity? How do we get to love? How do we get to whatever the listener is listening to and may identify, and they have a core that they know they can feel?
Yes.
And many don't even know that. But, but how do they get there?
And what you're actually asking is such a great question, because how do you choose it? Well, instead of it being haphazard, instead of it being like I ate really well today and I slept really well and I had a really good day at work, so I can access that. How can we proactively access that? How can we proactively decide to live on our wheel of freedom instead of our wheel of fear? Well, one is, again, that reframing of any time we recognize that we're on our wheel of fear. So that's one. And again, that's 4 components. The other thing is to focus on the wheel of freedom. And my wheel of freedom, like I shared with you, my essential nature, that part of me that I hid was authenticity. So my practice is, am I being authentic in this moment? And just like you with that love, that isn't always easy to do, right? That isn't easy to see. That isn't because again, I mean, if you talk to anybody that knows me, they would probably tell you I'm one of the most authentic people they know. It's one of the things that people say when they meet me. Oh my God, you're just like you are on TV. You're the same no matter what. And I'm like, yep, because I'm authentic, right? But it doesn't mean that there aren't moments or places in my life, things that I want to, like right now, I'm creating this new project that I'm doing. And I have been wrestling with it. Because being authentic also means that I must be willing to expose myself. I must be willing to share the scary stuff. I must be willing to, right, do what I'm told to do, i.e. by God himself, right? That is my authentic nature. So here I am. I know exactly what I'm meant to do. I got the message from God. I heard him. I got it. I know what I'm doing. But it doesn't mean that I can obey in a moment. Sometimes I can. Sometimes I can obey quickly. But other times, it's that internal wrestle. It's that place where I get to practice being more myself. I get to practice that authenticity. I get to practice falling into the arms of God, right? I get to practice that self-acceptance. So that's the thing. When you ask, how do we get there? It's what I call proactive behaviors. So if I commit to that new identity, like you said, i.e., I commit to the wheel of freedom. If I buy in to, i.e., okay, I see that I hid my authenticity away because it wasn't safe. I see that, okay. And then I see what I've always craved to be and what kind of people I admire. And I look around the world and go, wow, people that are being authentic are just wow, right? Like, wow, wow, right? So, people right now being so brave in the world, that courage is authenticity, right? They're living their values. And so I think that is so amazing. So those are the things that I admire, the things I appreciate, the things I respect, the things that I wish I could be, right? So that calls me to do, okay, well, how can I live that? How can I do that? And that's what I call the proactive behaviors. Now, when I work with clients and when I work with my students in Fearless Living Transformation Program, I want them to come up with enough proactive behaviors so they have one, whether they're home isolating, whether they're on a date, whether they're with their family, whether they're at work, whether they're with a friend, whether they're at, the grocery store. You need to have an arsenal of things that you can grab and lean onto so that when you start feeling that fear response bubble up, you immediately know what to do. Because if you don't do that, and we all know freeze, fight, flight, fake, fawn, right? We all know those lovely things. Mm-hmm. We're going to do one of those. And for many of us, we're going to freeze and we're not going to remember. Right. So we have to actually prepare for that moment. So I have my clients and my students write down on their phone a list of their proactive behaviors, things that they are going to do that are in alignment with their wheel of freedom, with alignment with their essential nature. So the things that I must do have to be aligned with authenticity. You must do things aligned with being loving, right? Being that loving essence. Then you must do those and I must do these. And how much can we expand in that place each and every moment of our life? That is a practice, right? That is something that we evolve towards. That is what we embrace. Now, there's going to be areas of our life that we do it more easily. So some places in our life right now, some areas of our life, we're already living more on our wheel of freedom. We're already being more authentic. You are being more loving. But then there's those other places that are harder to access this. And so one, give yourself credit for the places you're already doing it. Yay, me, right? Yay, I can do it here. Yay, me, right? And then acknowledge yourself. And I have a whole list of tools that you use in order to support you to get over that, the bridge from the wheel of fear to the wheel of freedom, because some days it's easy to get on that bridge and some days it's not. So I have a list of
It's almost an invisible bridge. It's almost like Indiana Jones.
It's a complete invisible
you have to take a step of faith to find the bridge.
100%. But this is the deal. You already know the outcome of the bridge. That's the good news. The outcome of the bridge, the path on the bridge is me living in my wheel of freedom, i.e. authenticity. It's you living in loving, right? So I already know the direction of the bridge. I already know what the bridge is made of. I already know everything about the bridge. I just have to decide that I'd rather practice being authentic, which, by the way, is going to be scary. When you practice loving in those areas that fear is alive, it's going to be scary to practice loving, right? It's not like, oh, I'm just going to be loving. Oh, I'm just going to be authentic. No, it scares the crap out of you.
Oh, it does.
And you have to remember.
It scares and it challenges. It challenges some other core beliefs that I'm saying I've been believing the wrong thing. And I need to change those beliefs.
You've been believing the thing that lives on your wheel of freedom, and you have to remember that that wheel of fear loves you too. So you haven't been wrong. You've misidentified because that's the way that you survived. And oh, by the way, how fantastic that you learned how to do that and you did survive. So congratulations. So we even love that. We even love that, right? So when we can love it all, that's when we really can transcend and live on our wheel of freedom more than not. But we're always going to do what I call stretch, risk, or die, which is the gift I have for your listeners. We're all going to practice stretch, risk, and die. Like you said, it's a risk. It's scary. Yeah. So then I have this tool called Stretch, Risk, or Die that's going to support you in understanding how to start taking some of those stretches that feel petrifying, some of those risks that feel impossible, and those dies that feel like you shut the door on those long ago. So once we identify those stretch, risk, and dies, then that's when we get to start practicing them. And we can practice the stretches first, which are things we know we can do. We just haven't succeeded. We know we can do. We just haven't done them. We can practice the risks, things we don't know if we could do. And the dies, the things that we're convinced we'll never do and will fail for sure. Right? So, but I'm going to give you the tool as a gift so that your listeners can, start
oh my goodness.
It's so good. It's everyone's favorite tool. And then it's 3 15-minute videos, for gosh sake. So do it in the next 24 hours. And on the third 15-minute video, what's awesome is that it also has me describing the Wheel of Fear in detail. So you're going to actually see me describe it in more detail than we were able to do today. So go to fearlessliving.org, fearlessliving.org/risk, fearlessliving.org /risk, RISK.
Yeah, I have links to your website, to your book. I'm going to put a link on this in the show notes.
Excellent. So, fearlessliving.org /risk. Put your name and email in, and you'll get access to the portal. You'll get access to the class. Take the quiz in the front to test yourself, then do 3 15-minute videos, for gosh sake. And then at the end, take the other quiz to see how much you've improved and how much awareness you have. And this is going to be a huge booster. It has worksheets, it has templates, it's got everything you need in order to actually.
And for free. Thank you. How gracious.
For free.
That's gracious. You know, Rhonda, this has been truly one of my all-time favorite shows. You are brilliant. This is, there's one quote that I have, and I think you've just described it throughout the show, and that is, everything I do is in service of one thing, to help you live the life your soul intended.
That's right.
This is who you are built to be. This is like what you were saying, DNA. This is what you were DNA'd to build, and you're helping people tap into not only experience but DNA to a core that's outside of our outside of our logical selves and into our heart self, into
the soul.
Oh, well, I don't know how we found you, but this is, you are brilliant, and you are so helpful and so authentic. It is just so genuine. It is just so genuine. What a delight to talk to you, Rhonda.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. And I'm so grateful that you are, being that loving presence in the world, because what we do need is more and more love. That love just washes over us and releases all that shame, melts it all away. So you have a very important job to do, and you're doing it very well. So thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.